Hello, good morning again, and welcome to the After College webinar on branding on and off campus. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Peterson. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at After College, and I'm going to be presenting to you. My presentation is about 25 minutes long. I just timed myself. So I have a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So I'll talk quickly. And at the end, we'll have time for questions. So as I'm presenting, feel free to use the questions tool in the GoToWebinar panel to ask questions as they pop into your head. Before we get started, too, I wanted to let you know that we're going to record the webinar today. So if you need to jump off and go somewhere, we'll send you a link to the recording tomorrow. You can go back and pick up where you left off. Or if you want to go back and listen to something again, of course, you can do that, or you can share it with any colleagues who may not have been able to make the live webinar today. Okay, so on to our agenda. So the first thing I'm going to do is just give you a really quick intro to After College and to myself. Then we're going to talk about how to define your employer brand and make that a little bit different from your corporate or product brand. Then we're going to touch briefly on the student journey and how to think about the student's journey as you're putting your brand strategy, an on-campus branding strategy together. Then we're going to talk a little bit about brand building tactics. And then finally, we're going to land on ROI, that's return on investment, and CRM. And then I'll just have a quick summary after that. So, quick intro. That's a picture of me. But I'll start first by talking about After College. So After College was founded in 1998 by a Stanford senior who saw the challenges that him and his fellow students were facing in terms of figuring out what career path they wanted and what kind of jobs they wanted to apply for. So we've been around for about 17 years or so. And our mission is really centered on helping every college student discover his or her career path. And we've done this by building a database of over 18,000 college faculty and student group contacts who are just as eager as we are to share internship and job opportunities and help these students figure it out. On the employer side, we help employers actually reach those students by doing a lot of outreach campaigns, both to promote on-campus events or to promote internships or jobs. So a little bit about me. I'm new to After College. I joined After College in January of this year, and the reason I joined is because I was so taken with their mission. I remember what it was like to be a college student, kind of confused about what kind of jobs to apply for and where to go and how to start my career. And then I've also worked for a number of large tech companies in marketing, and I've partnered with our recruiting and HR teams to help them sort of figure out how to take some of the marketing strategy and tactics that we use and to apply them on a recruiting side. So I understand some of the challenges that a lot of you as recruiters are facing. Before I joined After College, I was the head of brand strategy for YouTube at Google. And then before that, I was the director of marketing at Leapfrog, which is an educational toy and gaming company. And then before that, I was at Microsoft for many years working on the Xbox business. So throughout my career, I've been really focused on this age group, on millennials. And I'm endlessly fascinated with trying to figure them out. I myself am squarely in Generation X, so I'm always curious about the differences between X's and millennials or Y's. One quick note about that, as we go through this presentation, I'm going to refer to the current group of students in college as millennials. But I think many of you realize at this point we're at the tail end of the millennial generation. Millennials go all the way up to about age 35 right now, and the youngest millennials are graduating now. And so I think at this point, depending on who you talk to, you could pretty much consider the freshmen and sophomores in college as Generation Z, or some people are calling it Generation Z, or my favorite is Generation Zen. And so, but for the purposes of this webinar, we're just going to be referring to everybody as millennials. I'm actually in the process of doing some research to do a webinar on Generation Z, and we'll probably do that in the next couple months, so stay tuned for that. So let's dive right in. So here's the challenge. You know, a lot of employers, this is from a survey that a company called College Feed did. We actually acquired them about 6 months ago. They did a survey last year with employers, and what they found is, you know, 84% of employers believe college hiring and college brand building is important, but a lot of them believe that they have a really serious brand problem. So what we're seeing and what we're hearing from our clients and seeing in the research we do is either the students have a complete lack of awareness of their company in the first place, or they might not feel, they may be aware of their company, but they're not excited about what they do, or they don't fully understand it, or there's sort of a disconnect between their employer brand and who they are as an employer and their corporate brand. So an example of that is one of our clients is one of the nation's largest wireless carriers, and they have retail stores in every shopping mall in America. And so when students think of this big wireless carrier, they think, oh, retail job. Retail, I could work at retail, or maybe I could be a store manager. But in fact, the majority of their workforce are the IT and infrastructure and network management, the software and hardware engineers that are building and supporting and maintaining their huge wireless network on the back end. And they're desperately trying to hire STEM students, just like everybody else, but they're really not an employer that comes to mind to those students. So they're doing a lot of campaigns and a lot of on-campus events to try to change perceptions with STEM students about careers with them. So anyway, that's the challenge, and I'm hoping some of you are all nodding your head saying, yeah, I get that. I feel that every day. So before you go trying to build your brand or change perceptions of your brand, I wanted to first talk about how to define your employer brand. This is something I could probably do an entire webinar on, so I'm going to go through it really quick. But these are just some suggested steps for you to get to that point. So a prerequisite to doing anything with your employer brand is you really have to know your corporate or your product brand inside and out. If you don't already, you should really establish relationships with the marketing team at your company and go and talk to them and see what kind of, what they can tell you about your corporate brand. A lot of times they do brand tracking studies, or they have done other research where they've looked at competitors, and you should really understand how they're positioning your company relative to the competition, who are they targeting specifically, and how are they messaging to those targets. And have them be honest with you about their brand challenges and talk about what they feel they need to change. So that's the first step. That's a prerequisite, really. So in order for you to define your employer brand, the very first step that you would take, and this is the same step that marketers take when they're just doing a brand strategy work, is you have to really clearly define your student target candidates with as much detail as possible. Like even create personas if you can. So of course you probably have a sense of we want to hire students with these majors from these colleges. Maybe we want them to have this kind of a GPA, have done this kind of leadership or extracurricular activities. You might have that, but go deeper than that. Look at things like, what is important to them in terms of work-life balance. Are you looking for candidates who want to work in a big company where there's lots of opportunities to work on different projects and move around? Or are you looking for candidates that have an entrepreneurial spirit and want to be someplace where they get to really build something and get their hands dirty with all aspects? The second step in defining your employer brand is to do a competitive analysis. I'm sure you're clear on who your company's competitors are, but in the recruiting space, it's even more complicated for you because you're not only looking at your direct competitors for whatever product or service you're offering, but you're competing with companies in other industries and other sectors who are also trying to hire the same students. So when you're looking at the campuses that you're going to and the programs you want to do, look and see who is there, who's trying to get at these same students, and let that help shape your strategy and how you're positioning yourself. The next step is to develop a really crisp and clear employer brand positioning statement. And in the next slide, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to do that. That's a lot harder than it sounds. And then once you develop that positioning statement, the last step in this is to run it through my BS. I have a little BS test. You can't just make up your employer positioning, your employer brand in a vacuum. You actually really do need to test it out with the student candidates that you're targeting. So on to that. So there are a lot, if you talk to a lot of marketers or look at any marketing books, you'll see there's a lot of elaborate brand positioning statements, but I've sort of simplified it for you here. And this is what you want to be able to say to any candidate that you meet when you see them at a career fair. You want to be able to identify that one thing that really sets you apart from everybody else and will make you memorable in their minds. So the simplest way to do this is to fill out the statement. We're the only blank that blanks, right? So an example of that is we're the only employee-owned financial services firm. That's kind of interesting. Employee-owned, that would stick out in my head. Or we're the only technology company in this space that has a Nobel Prize winner advising our development team. That's kind of interesting. That would stick in my head. Or we're the only local market research firm that pays for graduate school after 2 years of service. That's a great benefit. So get really crisp on what you want this positioning statement to be, and then test it out. So here's my BS test, right? So once you've done this, you need to make sure and check every single one of these boxes. You can't just check one or two. Is what you're positioning yourself on something that the student candidates really care about, right? So if you say something like, we're the only company that offers 401k matching, maybe they don't care about that at this point in their lives. They may not even exactly understand what that means. So pick something that they really care about. Second of all, pick something that's really clear, that they're going to get it. So if you're standing in front of them at a career fair where there's a lot of noise and a lot of things going on, you can just say this one thing to them and it's like, zing, okay, it's very clear, I get it. Your positioning has to be credible. You can't claim something that if they don't believe it, right? And then also it needs to be unique. And this is really, out of all of these, the most important thing is it has to be something that sets you apart from the other employers that they're talking to. And then finally, it needs to be real. Like, you have to claim something that you actually really do, obviously. So don't stretch the truth. Okay, moving on. So the next thing, when you're thinking about your brand and all of your recruiting activities, what I'd like to encourage you to do is think about the student journey. Journey mapping is actually a tool that comes out of the user experience and user design discipline, and we've sort of, over the last few years, kind of taken that into marketing. We sort of stole the idea of journey mapping from them, and now I'm encouraging you to take it on the recruiting side. This is basically a journey map, or understanding the student journey is really thinking through from the beginning to end of their academic journey and then their transition into their career. What are all of the different stages and steps that they're at? And at those stages and steps, how do they feel? What are they interested in? What's motivating them? What's scaring them? What is challenging them? So keep that in mind when you're thinking about your strategy. This is just kind of a rough outline of what that could look like. I mean, a lot of companies are coming in as early as high school and starting to do a little bit of brand awareness, and then definitely by the time they're on campus, there's a lot of opportunities to do brand engagement and awareness building in the freshman, sophomore year, and then obviously on through junior and senior year when they start to get more serious about landing a job or an internship, and they start to think more seriously about their career and their first job. Okay. So here are some on-campus brand building tactics. I'm intentionally not talking about career fairs, and I'm not talking about info sessions today. My colleague Matt did a webinar on those 2 or 3 weeks ago, and so we'll send you a link to his webinar if you want to listen to them. I think those are both amazing ways to connect with a high volume of students, to maybe capture students that you normally wouldn't get to otherwise. And I can't say enough about what great opportunities those both are. But what I want to talk about today and focus on are tactics that require strong faculty and student relationships. And this is them. So the reason I picked these two is I feel like any kind of branding that you do, especially with this generation, has to be authentic. If there was one theme to the millennial and the Gen Z generation, is authenticity. You need to be authentic when you're speaking to them, and you're, as a representative of your brand, do. And then all of the materials you put out, everything you do really needs to be authentic. And then the second word I would use to sort of describe these specific types of opportunities is contextual. Like you're in context with them. It's not abstract. It's kind of abstract, I think, for some students to go to an info session and hear you talk about what your company does. But if you can take your brand and your company and sort of bake it into their curriculum and what they're learning, it just adds a lot more contextual relevancy to what their perception is of you. So the first on this list is guest lectures or classroom presentations. I mean, this is clearly a memorable way to bring your brand into the classroom. And of course, the key to making this happen is having relationships with key faculty. I mean, I'd say generally faculty are open to having people come in and speak if it's topical and relevant to what they're teaching. A lot of faculty are very open to having an outside worldview being brought into the classroom. It actually kind of brings what they're teaching to life. If you don't already have relationships with faculty, you can always start with your current employees and reach out to them and see if they're still in touch with faculty from their schools, or if they have any contacts that could possibly get some guest lectures going. One of the suggestions I have for these is just when you're pitching sort of the idea of coming in and doing a guest lecture, always think about how am I adding value to the class. I know you want to go in there and talk about your employer brand and how great it is to work at your company and maybe your benefits and all these other things, but in this context, you really need to think about how am I adding value to the curriculum and adding value to what the students are learning. And you can do that by, talking not just about your company, talk about your industry, or talk about your business model, or talk about some technology that you're using that other companies might be using too, but how you're maybe doing it a little bit differently. So the next thing that has become super popular over the last few years is hackathons. A lot of colleges and universities now have very well organized and well run hackathons. And so in that case, it's easy for you possibly to jump in as a sponsor or a speaker or to provide equipment or other supplies for a hackathon. And if you don't know what a hackathon is, it's basically a handful of students. Usually it's technology students, but I'm seeing more and more that it actually can also be graphic designers, writers, marketers, and business majors who are helping figure out the business model. But they kind of lock themselves in for a few days, literally bring their sleeping bags and a bunch of coffee, and they have some sort of problem, maybe a technical challenge they're trying to solve, or some sort of business or something that they're trying to think through. So that's a really great way, again, for you to be sort of really authentically and contextually involved with what the students are learning, and in this case, what they're really doing. The next tactic I have for you is case studies, and this might slant a little bit more towards business majors and business schools, but I know business professors are often looking for real-world examples that they can use in the classroom. So, for example, when I worked at YouTube, we had a real business challenge getting to a specific segment of viewers. And what we were finding is they would come to YouTube, they would watch one video, and they would go away, and they wouldn't click on any of the related content. So I wrote a brief, and I went out to a university professor that was teaching advertising, and I basically, he broke his class up into groups of 5 or 6 students, and for that whole semester, they did research with a specific segment, and they came back and presented plans on how they thought YouTube should approach, increasing video consumption with this specific segment. And it was great. It was like having some little mini McKinsey consultants helping us, but it also really gave the students a real view into what it's like. I mean, this was a real business challenge for us. And that created all kinds of goodwill with the professors and others in the university and the students themselves. So the next thing is affiliate programs. A lot of universities, especially in the STEM area, have formalized affiliate programs, and an affiliate program typically works like this. There's different membership levels. You can pay a certain amount of money to be a part of this affiliate program, and then that gives you opportunities to go to very specialized events where you're getting just the students you're targeting. A lot of times they have sort of private or secret job boards where you can post your internships and your jobs. Oftentimes they have panels of people where you can help shape the curriculum or come in and guest lecture. And I'd say the key to this, really pulling this off and making the most of an opportunity like this, is you need to line up people in your organization, like your director of engineering or your director of marketing or whomever, who will be your partner in this. Because as an HR or recruiter, you're going to help facilitate this and set it up. But at the end of the day, you need somebody in your organization who is from this discipline, who can come in and help provide content and be the person to sit on the panel, be the person to do the lecture. So anyway, but I think the affiliate programs are a really great opportunity for you to get involved in a really, really focused and meaningful way. And then the last two things on this list are, we've talked a lot about the sort of in-person on-campus stuff, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about what you should be doing off-campus, or at least touch on it briefly online. One of the most important things is for you to have a destination on your website for students that goes beyond your general career page. You need to have a place that it has to be mobile enabled, meaning they can look at it clearly on a mobile device, but have content and examples and use language and use messaging on that area of your site that really resonates with them and helps them understand what a career could really look like at your company. They spend a lot of time, we do research here with students a lot, and they do spend a lot of time online on company websites reading about what you do and trying to figure out if it's the right fit for them. So it's important to have that. And then, of course, social, right? I'm sure most of you already have social media channels on Facebook and Twitter for your employer brand. But the one point I want to make about social is it has to be a two-way conversation. Don't just post stuff about your company, latest press release, or here's a picture of everybody at the company picnic. Really use social for what it does best, which is a two-way conversation, and try to do things in social media that really engage students. Put a post up of a real business challenge you're having or a technical challenge and see what kind of response you get. Do a poll or a survey or something to get them engaged, or have some sort of online contest. I think that's, and there's also a lot of really interesting social listening tools, like off-the-shelf tools that you can use just to even listen to the kind of chatter that's going on. Again, your marketing team might already be doing this. Okay, we're in the home stretch. So ROI. So, ROI, return on investment, has always been a challenging thing for those of us in marketing, for sure, and I'm sure also for you in recruiting, especially when you're talking about brand, because brand is a very, very difficult thing to measure, even for the biggest brands in the world who spend a lot of time and money studying their brands. So, so I think that my suggestion on how to measure this, and I think the critical key to measuring your brand success and all of your efforts, is to have a really robust CRM program and system in place. And CRM in sort of the traditional business sense, I'm sure a lot of you, when I say CRM, the first thing that comes to mind is like Salesforce, or some of these big unwieldy CRM solutions that big sales forces use to get to get prospects in a pipeline and through a funnel and sell to them. And the concept isn't that different, but I think in your case as on-campus recruiters, the way you should think about this more is about really, this is like relationship marketing, right? Candidate relationship marketing is what I think the CRM should stand for in your case. And so what I mean by this is, if you think back to the student journey, first of all, you have, in order to be successful with your relationship marketing program, you have to capture their information, right? So you at least need their name and their email, graduation date, maybe their major, and the school that they're going to. But imagine if you connected with a student their freshman year and you got this information from them. And maybe they don't know what they want to major in. They're just taking the prerequisites right now, but you planted a seed with them. Maybe you met them at an event or something. The idea behind relationship marketing is that you would continually be in touch with the students throughout their student journey, and you would be sending them information by email or inviting them to events that you're having on campus. You would be doing that, the appropriate information, sending it to them at the right time during their journey. You would basically be nurturing your relationship with them and making them feel like you care about them, you're engaged with them, you're seeing them through their academic journey, and that, reminding them of the opportunities that await for them at your company, at your organization. So again, I could do a whole webinar just on this topic, but I just wanted to bring this up as sort of like my final thing. So it is possible to measure ROI, but the key is just to really start early and have some sort of system in place. It could be an Excel spreadsheet, or it could be an off-the-shelf CRM tool that really get them into some sort of tool, track them, and nurture those candidate leads throughout their journey. So with that, I will go on to my conclusion slide, and then we can get on to questions. So I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to go ahead and ask questions. In the GoToWebinar control panel, there's a questions tab, so feel free to type in your questions. So to summarize what I've listed through so quickly today. The first recommendation I have for you is to really clearly define your employer brand positioning and how that is either similar or different from your corporate brand positioning. My second suggestion for you is to match your branding tactics and your messaging with the student journey and always have that journey in mind. The third suggestion I have for you is use tactics that really bring your brand into the classroom and bring some sort of authentic and contextual awareness to who you are and what you do. The third thing is it's really important to build relationships with faculty and student groups so that you can get access to the students that you really want to have access to and so that you can pull off all of this in classroom, in curriculum tactics. And then my last suggestion is to build a candidate relationship marketing process and program so that you can nurture these students really and nurture your relationship with them as they go through their journey, and then hopefully at the end, the holy grail, your ROI, is they apply for an internship or they apply for a job at your company and they get it. So with that, I'm going to take a sip of water and we will move on to questions. Oh, one last thing, if I go to the last slide here. So I've provided my email address. It's speterson@aftercollege.com. I would love to hear from you, so if you want to email me individually with questions or you want to talk more about any of these topics, I'm happy to have a conversation with you. And I also wanted to direct you to our employer blog. We have a great blog with a lot of information. Like I know we have an article on affiliate programs, which I mentioned earlier, and some of the other topics I covered, like CRM. We have a lot of great posts on our blog that go much deeper than I was able to go to today. So with that, I will take questions.
So we have one here. Someone wants to know, if I'm speaking to a class, what should I leave them with, or how do I make it so that I'm not just talking at them?
Okay, so that's kind of two different questions. So, so you definitely should always come to class with a few questions for them. Like anytime you're speaking, you need to bring them into the conversation. What do you think about this? What would you do if you were me? Like especially, it depends on what you're talking to them about. But I think it would be really good to ask them some questions. And the other thing too is, you know, have a good story, whether it's about your company or your own personal career path and why you joined that company. People love stories. They want to hear not what you do, but they want to hear why you do it, right? And then to the second part of that question, which is what do you leave behind? Well, I think it kind of depends on who you're talking to. If you're going to give people a link to like your ATS system and here, go apply here, make sure again that if you're talking to seniors, maybe that's okay. But you know, because if they're at that point where they're applying for a job. But I think it's important to have a destination. It could be one of your social channels, or it should probably be your website, where they can go learn more about what you do. And this is what we were talking about earlier, like the importance of having a place, a destination on your site that's really specifically for them, that talks about your company and the career opportunities there, and maybe even has profiles of alumni and other people who've joined your company and the great things they've done.
And so we have one more question here. Someone wants to know if they have a very plain brand and they don't have fun office events or anything that they can show off, what are things they can talk to students about to show off their brand in other ways?
Well, again, I think that's probably two different things. So, you know, a plain brand. Well, I think that the best thing you can do, whether you have a plain brand or the most exciting, fabulous brand in the world, like say you work for PepsiCo and you're the Mountain Dew, you know, whatever, or Red Bull, you know, or YouTube. I think that most important thing you can do is always talk about your mission and your vision. Like, why do you exist? Why do you do what you do? Because that all of a sudden can bring a really boring, plain brand to life. So I think that's really important. And again, come with stories. Why was your company founded? What were the founders thinking? Why did they do this? Because somebody at some point was really passionate about whatever it is that you do. And so even if it's something that most people would consider really boring, somebody at some point thought it was really exciting. So try to tell that story, right? So what was the second part of that question?
What are different things that you can show off about your brand?
Oh, well, I think the best thing you can do is to make it real. By not, if you're in recruiting or HR, one of the most important things you can do is always bring along somebody who actually is doing the work that you're talking about. So they can really see sort of, somebody who's in, somebody they want to be, somebody who maybe went to their school or at least had the same kind of major or career path and is doing the kind of work that they may want to do. I think that is really important. The other thing is use multimedia. I mean, that's really basic, but having a bunch of really kind of corporate, boring PowerPoint slides that does not really work. So if you have multimedia, if you have video or anything interesting you can share or show them to give them, sort of more of a little peek into your world, your brand, and your company, I think that's a really good thing to do as well.
Great. I think that's it for questions. So we're all finished here. Thank you so much for attending our webinar.
Yes, thank you so much. And again, you can reach out to me if you have questions. My email is peterson@aftercollege.com. And then I also encourage you to go to our website, which is aftercollege.com if you want to learn more about what we do, or go to our employer blog, which is employer.aftercollege.com if you want to get a little bit more information on what we discussed today. So I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us, and be on the lookout for an email tomorrow with a link to this webinar. And then also we'll probably be doing some more webinars in the future, like I said, on Generation Z. Thanks and have a great day. Bye-bye.